8 months of Israel's depraved genocidal frenzy in Gaza. And we must never, ever, ever stop being shocked. Never stop being disgusted and never stop feeling righteous rage. This must never be normalised. Israel has just massacred dozens of Palestinian civilians in Rafah, where most of Gaza's pre-war population was driven to, originally under threat of violence by the Israeli state. Many of them are children, kids, babies. I've seen, as too many of you have, videos and images of the charred, disintegrating bodies of children, of decapitated babies. It's worth stating clearly that there was far more outrage over the alleged beheading of Israeli babies on the 7th of October, which I must point out did not happen, which was invented, including by President Joe Biden, who lied to the world when he'd said he'd seen images of beheaded babies. There was far more outrage over that fiction than there has been over 14,000 plus Palestinian children being slaughtered, many of them babies, including the babies beheaded yesterday by the Israeli missile strike in Rafah. That particular entirely false claim was used to justify a genocidal onslaught which has killed so many babies, so many toddlers, so many young kids, so many teenagers, as well as so many other innocent Palestinians. Now, last week, the International Court of Justice issued a legally binding order for Israel to cease its military onslaught against Rafah, on the grounds that it may inflict on the Palestinian group in Gaza conditions of life that could bring about its physical destruction, whole or in part. We're talking there, of course, about genocide. Now, the Israeli state has given its response. They claimed that this was an intelligence-based precision strike targeting 2 senior Hamas figures, and the IDF, true to form, like it has done with its atrocities over and over again, tried to deflect and lie, claiming this strike didn't take place in the humanitarian area designated. Then Benjamin Netanyahu publicly declared that it was a tragic mishap. To be fair, they normally spend months until they admit responsibility after doing lie, deflection, muddy the waters, and wait until the tension has moved on and everyone just files this in a fog of war. Now, Netanyahu then added, "I will keep fighting until the flag of victory is raised, and I don't intend to end the war before every goal has been achieved. If we give in, the massacre will return." Quite something to say when you are yourself perpetrating one of the great massacres of our age. The equivalent death toll of so many October 7ths already, with so many October 7ths inflicted against Gaza still to come. The Israeli state claimed yesterday that these were 2 legitimate targets under international law, targeted with the use of precise munitions and on the basis of precise intelligence, and that they are aware that a fire caused ignited, meaning that several civilians were harmed. Well, that's one way of putting it, isn't it? Now, rather than listen to the lies and deflections of Israeli propagandists, let's listen to NGOs on the ground like Médecins Sans Frontières. Their emergency coordinator in Gaza, Samuel Johan, said, "Women and children were among the people that were brought to the stabilisation point, and once again, civilians are paying the price of this war. This Israeli attack on a populated camp in a so-called safe zone in Rafah shows the complete disregard for the lives of civilians in Gaza." Now, a few things to note. A crucial piece of investigative journalism by the Israeli journalist Yuval Abraham has found that that Israeli intelligence sources told him that the Israeli army was willing to accept 20 civilians killed for lower-ranking Hamas members and up to 300 for senior Hamas figures. Now, the chief prosecutor at the International Criminal Court, Karim Khan, last week issued arrest warrants against Benjamin Netanyahu and his defence minister, Yoav Gallant. In an interview since, he said there were attempts to kill Margaret Thatcher. Eri Neve was blown up. Lord Mountbatten was killed. There was the Enniskillen attack with kneecappings. But the British didn't decide to say, well, on the Falls Road, that is the heart of Catholic Belfast, there undoubtedly may be some IRA members and Republican sympathisers, so therefore let's drop a £2,000 bomb on the Falls Road. You can't do that. I should point out that, of course, that isn't to say, and shouldn't be to say, that Britain did not commit horrific atrocities against the Irish people for centuries, in fact, but including, for example, the likes of Bloody Sunday. But just going on what he's saying, this is the point, I think that's interesting. He hasn't issued arrest warrants specifically relating to Israel's bombing campaign. In a statement last week, he said that was still being investigated. Obviously, the ICC has been prevented from entering Gaza to assess evidence, like international journalists have, but this suggests more charges are on the way. The point he was making is that even if you say we've got a military target here. You cannot simply drop a bomb and slaughter a load of civilians in the process. You cannot simply say, well, in this case, we had 2 legitimate targets, so dozens of civilians killed, including so many little kids. That's legitimate collateral damage. But there's several other points here too. Israel said they launched this attack based on their intelligence with military precision. So even if they try to pass off this as some sort of accident, that means their military is not capable of operating in a way that doesn't slaughter civilians. Their best defense there is they are totally incompetent, not the world-leading military force they claim to be. And indeed, how many accidents, Israel? How many? You saw tens of thousands of Palestinians, huge numbers of children for 8 months now. Even if you apply the best possible story for Israel here, that they simply could not anticipate some sort of chain reaction based on this targeted bombing, which would kill lots of civilians. Well, bear in mind, even their main patron, their main ally on Earth, the world's last remaining superpower, the United States of America, publicly said they were not convinced Israel could proceed with any major offensive against Rafah in a way that could protect civilians. Gaza is one of the most densely populated places on Earth, and obviously huge numbers remain in Rafah. They were warned by their main ally it was not possible to launch an operation without massive slaughter. So, again, the whole point there, which was made by their own allies, is it was not safe to proceed against in a military attack on Rafah. So any way you look at it, they don't actually have any excuses. Where does Joe Biden's publicly stated red line stand now? Now let's listen to Bushra Khalidi from Oxfam describing the scene.
You have teams in Gaza. What more can you tell us about what happened in Rafah itself?
There are no more words, really, to explain how horrific the images we woke up to this morning. I don't only have colleagues, I also have friends. I've got my in-laws that are in Gaza. I mean, the sheer panic and fear of this just culminating further. We saw images of children blown up to pieces, burnt to crisp. And I'm sorry to be graphic, but that is what we saw this morning. We woke up to more images of destruction and death and a whole camp of tents on fire. You know, these are displaced people. These are people that have experienced relentless bombings. They are likely to have lost their homes. They're sheltering in somewhere they think is safe, although we have said numerous times how nowhere in Gaza is safe. And, you know, it's appalling, it's horrific, and it needs to stop. And we thought that this was going to be the red line. We thought that with the ICJ order, member states would really take this upon themselves to really impose measures to stop the Rafah incursion. Yet, you know, what we're seeing is more death, more destruction in the last standing city of Gaza.
Listen to this Palestinian man's testimony.
I lost 5 family members. We were sitting in tents when suddenly the camp was bombed. I lost 5 family members, all burned completely. Among the victims were pregnant women. They kept telling us this area was safe until we're bombed.
Listen to this too from Al Jazeera.
On Sunday, at least 8 Israeli missiles struck a tent camp in Rafah, housing dozens of displaced families in an area the Israeli military itself had designated as a safe zone. The airstrike sparked a fire, killing dozens of people, most of them women and children. Witnesses say some were trapped inside these tents and burned alive.
Trapped in tents and burned alive. It's not really possible to imagine the terror, the horror, the pain of the last moments those people had alive. Now, let me read this post by Hamza Attar, a Palestinian journalist based in Luxembourg. Israel burnt 5 members of my family to death in Rafah, the safe zone, when it bombed their tents. 1. Wissam al-Attar, 29 years old. 2. Hindari al-Attar, 29 years old. Hamada al-Attar, 35 years old. Mesa al-Attar, 32 years old. Miada al-Attar, 23 years old. Let's try and remember some of those names. Those people are people who lived, who loved, who feared, who hoped, who wept, who laughed, who argued, who hugged, who had dreams for the future as they lived the nightmares of their present. They deserved better, so much better, than to be burned alive as the world's most powerful nations did nothing but aid and abet their murder. The children who've been butchered remain faceless, not treated as children like the ones you have or your loved ones or neighbours have, like the children who play down the street. So let's see some of those kids.
الحرب العيد في العيد
Now look, if this was an atrocity that had just been committed by Russian forces, burning alive dozens of refugees, including little kids, and we were staring at the bodies of incinerated children and headless babies, there would be justified screams of outrage and disgust from Western leaders and media outlets. It would be used as key central evidence that Vladimir Putin is one of the great monsters of our age. But when Palestinians are burned alive by Israel, the best that can be hoped for is hand-wringing and Israeli lies and attempts at deflection and muddying the waters being indulged. There hasn't even been an attempt to disguise how little worth is attached to Palestinian life. So those who backed Israel's murderous onslaught and now scroll past the charred bodies of kids in your timeline trying to reassure yourself, this is not on you, you didn't sign up for this. Yes, you did. Israel's political and military leaders could not have been clearer from the start that they were planning one of the great crimes of our age. From the very beginning, they made blood-curdling promises while slaughtering Palestinian civilians from the very start, it should be said. You either chose not to listen or you ignored them. More realistically, you made a conscious choice that you did not believe Palestinian life had anything like the same value as Israeli life, and you acted on that choice. Political, media and public figures in this country and other countries aided and abetted one of the worst crimes of our age. And when they were not given, were they not given more prior warning of what was to happen than most crimes in history? You could have put pressure on your government to use its leverage over Israel. You chose not to. Now, mass protests in Paris have broken out in response. We can see huge numbers there who took to the streets in disgust, in horror, in fury at what has happened in Rafah, and of course demands for this horror to end. But you know what I still can't get over? What I still can't forgive? It isn't the ones who still cheer up this obscenity on, who I regard as depraved beyond redemption. It's those who remain silent, who won't speak out and describe this crime for what it is, except for hand-wringing, futile, meaningless hand-wringing. That's why I listened to this by the South African influencer Candice King, and let's just say it struck a chord.
Baby! What the hell is wrong with you? I'm not talking about the Israeli government. I'm talking about you guys who are still silent because you don't want to lose your sponsor. People are burning right now. Their bodies. Can you imagine the smell? There were just rumors of babies being beheaded by Hamas. No one saw pictures. These were just rumors, and the world went crazy. But there are photos and pictures of beheaded babies in Rafah. The beheaded babies should draw the line for us all. And if it hasn't drawn a line for you, you're cooked. You're cooked. I'm not crazy. You're crazy because you're not doing anything and you think this is normal. Me right now, this is normal behavior. Yeah, you're not acting normal. You can see that stuff and stay silent. You're crazy. You should lose your mind. In fact, if you're not gonna lose your mind, I urge you, unfollow me and freaking block me because you're a psychopath.
Well, that is a far more normal response to children being burned alive with Western complicity than saying nothing, than feeling nothing, than looking away and pretending it isn't happening. It's hard not to feel like you're not going mad when you live through one of the great crimes of our age and there are so many people who could use their power to stop it who are doing nothing. Now, I read this poem from Frida Hasanat, posted by the Gaza Poet Society. It was a night. The tents wept over the bodies of children they couldn't shield from the bomb's flames. And I must confess, I sobbed when I read that. All I just want to finally say is this. If you're British, you do actually have power right now. There's an election on. Tories are going to lose badly, deservedly so. Labour are going to win no matter what. But despite the hand-wringing, they refused to support any actual action, like ending arms sales to Israel as a bare minimum. The Green Party, on the other hand, do support that kind of action, as do independent candidates like Jeremy Corbyn in Islington North and Leanne Mohammed in Ilford North. The least we can do, given the Tories are toast, no matter what, is to support them, to send Labour a message. Enough. Take action. Stop facilitating genocide. We should act. That is a concrete thing we can do right now, rather than just give another blank cheque for the next government, which will have a huge majority, to do as it wants, which will mean doing nothing to stop this horror and make it stop for good. Please like and subscribe. Do leave your comments. Do help us take on the pro-war media at patreon.com/OJ84. We've got loads of videos, including documentaries around the country as we cover the 2024 general election here in Britain. Listen to us on the podcast. I'll speak to you soon.